Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today, I bring you my after-action report on a second-round game in the Olympus Tournament being run by Bob the Builder. It was Game 7 of the semi-final round. As you may recall, I decided to name each of these videos after a Star Wars movie because I figured there would be a fair number of them, and Olympus Tournament has the same initials as original Trilogy. Naturally, therefore, I'm calling this second game The Empire Strikes Back. We played on Backstabber, and I played as Italy, which is easily my weakest power to play as, so this promised to be fun. I will be representing the Italian perspective, and I'll also be providing the French perspective reading from the script of the French player Grayson, who was kind enough to give me his thoughts on the game too. Please enjoy. Spring 1901, the Italian perspective. I started off the game feeling confident because of my board top in the preliminary rounds, but less confident because I was playing Italy, my least favorite on the classic diplomacy map. My first move was to seek alliance with Austria against Turkey. I started out talking to Austria and did not really communicate much with Russia, which may have been a mistake. When orders processed, you can see that I moved to Tyrolia and bounced with Germany there, moved into Ionian as usual, and moved to Tuscany because it's good to keep people guessing, and there was some thought of a possible central triple that might emerge in the future in my mind as well. I thought the Tuscany move would be a good way to keep France on his toes without antagonizing him the way a Piedmont move would. Truthfully, I was considering changing these moves because they're kind of a random choice for me, not what I typically do as Italy, but time ran out. Spring 1901, the French perspective. So firstly, France is a nation I love, objectively the best nation from a competitive standpoint by far, and is a power that just fits my playstyle as well, so I'm feeling good. My chats in the East were rather generic. I joked around with Russia about him apparently making a 7-person alliance. I heard that Turkey was just trying to avoid an AIR, while doing a bit of gossiping about who the players could be. I recognized Turkey's press right away as Jack the Ripper, so I kept my eye on that silently for a while. I discussed with Italy about doing a DMZ, and just focusing on our sides of the board. In my opinion, to have success as either nation, this is just a great deal. I started with the typical North Africa, West Med, Lyon, Piedmont deal, and the Italian was positive about it. In fact, they asked to increase the DMZ to include Tyrrhenian Sea, Spain's south coast, and no fleet builds in Marseille and Rome. I was nervous about agreeing to Spain's south coast, as I think the flexible mid-Atlantic Ocean Spain position is an incredibly strong position that I want available to me if needed. So I ask that a fleet never goes to Tunis and takes it with an army instead. He's got himself a deal. I figured either Italy can accept this and maybe have to ask for a change to the deal later, or the deal just stays in place, both good for me. I sound like I'm not shutting down a deal while having it be slightly in my interests. Not having Spain available is annoying, but this is an acceptable deal on both sides, looking back on the game. As for Austria, I opened saying FA have a lot of correlated success in diplomacy, and after a bit of back and forth, I said that I fear he's surrounded by some of the sharks in this tournament, so I'd be happy to help him out, through information sharing or just offering advice. And he responded very positively. This will become important later on. None of this is important to what I'm actually doing now, though. So the plan is to see what the people in the West say and go from there. Immediately I get a good rapport with Germany. They seem likable but come off a bit sketchy. So my response was to try and convince him that we slow play in FG. I take Belgium in 1901 and keep an Iberian dot in my back pocket for 1902. He takes his usual Holland and Denmark, with Sweden as his 1902 target. And then we bounce England in 1903. Germany seemed on board, and all felt a little too easy. England was my choice of ally in the first turn. They were very personable, and once I got Germany to agree with my plan, I went to England and pitched an idea of him bouncing Holland in the fall so that I can support him in next year. After we'd discussed that, Germany was trying to get us both to go to the Channel, and that we both turned down. They seemed on board with the idea, and I was very happy knowing that not only would I get to play both sides, but that I could get Belgium and have England and Germany both on 4 and fighting, while I was effectively on 6. Just before the end of the turn, Germany reaches out saying they are worried about me in Burgundy because Italy has not responded to their Tyrolia DMZ, and having 2 units on Munich scares them. I was firm about me being in Burgundy, but said that if Italy is scaring them with their silence, why not go to Tyrolia himself? He agreed, and I'm even happier knowing I have Belgium without any worries in the fall. Fall 1901, the Italian perspective. This season, I encouraged Russia down the Austria-Italy-Russia alliance path. I like the Italian-Russian alliance, but I get a bit nervous about seeing Turkey benefit in any way from anything I do as Italy, hence why I felt Austria needed to be involved. Having seen the rather unexpected results of Spring 1901, I confessed to Austria that I had given some thought to the idea of attacking him, but reassured him that I had changed my mind. Austria and I made a plan to go after Turkey, in which I would move into both Aegean Sea and Trieste. This was Austria's plan, and I must admit I respected the bold inventiveness of it. The willingness to take a risk, that I could easily backstab him and just take one of his supply centers and use it as a platform to further attack him in the future. Fall 1901. The French perspective. This was the most important turn of the game from my perspective. Let's just say England only said 3 words to me the entire turn. "Let's go, buddy." That's definitely reassuring. On the other hand, me and Germany must have combined for over 10,000 words in this turn alone. We discussed Sweden briefly, and I'm trying to nudge him into bouncing it so that RG can't hold off the EF, and that must have got him thinking. Apparently the rumor mill was all completely against me, and everyone in the East were talking about some obvious EF openings. This wasn't completely inaccurate. I was leaning that way, but his long message about how he was worried about England bouncing Holland, and that I talked him into a perfect EF position, which is true, sorry. He also said that he was going to tap Burgundy and tell England to bounce me in Belgium, and basically hand England all the power in the West. I did not like this at all. So my response to this was very unorthodox, but I knew with how strong some of the players on the other side of the board were, I needed an ally that said more than 3 words per turn. So I went all in. I basically told the truth, but I made it sound nice in that I hadn't decided my ally. He had actually guessed my identity, because I'm active on Discord, so I leaned into it and told a story about how he reminded me of myself when I was a newer player, and how I was in the mentor role now, which was fun. This was all true, but perhaps exaggerated a little, and built a solid relationship very early on. Also, in response to his Burgundy threat, I told him I'd move Burgundy to Belgium instead of moving from Picardy like I planned, and he had the choice of going to Burgundy and dealing with armies in Paris and Marseille, or he could hold and we would go after England next year. Not only did this work, but he agreed to bounce Sweden like I planned, so that if I did want to pivot to EF, it would be easy. But at this stage, Germany was my ally, and it was not really close. In the East, again, I was just having generic conversation with Russia and Turkey. Russia tried to probe who I was working with, and I was honest, saying I hadn't chosen yet. He asked about Sweden, to which I said, I don't have any idea. And looking back on it, I think this was the truth as well. Germany bouncing Sweden was a very late addition to our agreement. The fun conversation was with Italy and Austria. Because of the opening moves, I didn't like how it effectively forced Italy to take Tunisia with a fleet, breaking our deal. Italy apologized for being inactive as they were trying to balance 15 games at the same time, to which I realized that Italy was very likely Florida Man, based off a Discord comment he made a week earlier, so I asked and he confirmed. I was going to bring up my annoyance about Tunis with Italy, but I had a better idea, and that was to go through the more active player in Austria. Again, I said this relationship was important. They were worried, just like me, about Italy's spring orders, so I told them that it could actually result in a good plan, because Italy could only go to the Aegean or Tunisia. Aegean is risky, but Tunisia breaks my deal with the Italian, so if the pitch of Venice to Trieste comes from Austria, in combination with Ionian to Aegean, then that would just be perfect. Normally I don't meddle on the other side of the board, but Austria seemed very happy with this and pitched it to Italy. Not only was Italy likely to go for this high-tempo AI play, but it keeps Italy away from me. Austria is happy with me because I'm giving him good tactical advice, and it shuts down Turkey, who I know is Jack the Ripper and is someone I see as a threat. It's a win-win-win. After orders go through and every move went to plan, I knew this would be a good game for France. 1901 builds the Italian perspective. Austria and I began discussing getting Russia to work with us against Turkey, seeing that Turkey had let Russia into Romania and was therefore not helping our team. The talks proceeded well between the two of us, as well as separately with Russia. 1901 builds the French perspective. The only builds I cared about were my own, Germany's, and England's, but this became another issue with England because they did not send a single message to me in all of the winter phase. Meaning, other than spring 1901, they sent 3 words to their #1 ally all game, in a semi-final. I convinced Germany to build a fleet to go for Sweden, while I build standard with a fleet in Brest and army in Marseille, once again trying to not make any enemies. Spring 1902, the Italian perspective. This season, Austria and I became very firm on working with Russia against Turkey, and a group chat started with all 3 of us. When orders processed, you see Russia supported Austria into Bulgaria, pretty much exactly what was needed to solidify this alliance. I was also preparing for a convoy into Turkey, setting up for a possible belated Lepanto. Spring 1902, the French perspective. Well, apparently England did not like Fleet Brest, which I found really funny because even if I was locked in with England, I would have built in Brest anyway. But this huge change in volume of press was something I did not like. They basically don't talk when they're working with you, but if you do something they don't like, then their press picks up. No thank you. So my job this turn was to get them to focus away from me while I hit them in the back and cement my alliance with Germany. Italy is also happy the fleets are pointed north and away from him, so it's just the best move in my mind. I also remind Italy of our deal of no fleets in Tunis and say that I'm taking Spain with an army and would like them to take Tunis with their army in Venice this year. This takes some pressure off me and Austria, which I like. I get Germany focused north while I move into Burgundy just in case I have to cover Marseille, and all is going smoothly in the west when orders come in. With Austria, we have started to talk about Italy. Assuming they are successful in this AIR and Turkey is taken out quickly, Italy can only move against Austria or myself next. So maybe we should take that decision away from them. Austria seems open to the idea, and this is me starting the baby steps towards getting Austria involved in an alliance with myself and Germany. Fall 1902, the Italian perspective. Austria was not super trusting of me, which is somewhat understandable for a power that is all too often the meat in an Italian-Russian sandwich, or a Russian-Turkish sandwich, or an Italian-Russian-Turkish sandwich, sometimes with Germany involved. He asked that we perform a coordinated bounce in Budapest, which I thought was fair enough, considering he had allowed me to have Trieste and given no sign of asking for it back. So I agreed. There was rather limited communication in the group chat this time, which is why the Romania moved to Bulgaria, and Russia clearly had not gotten the latest word from us when he decided to do that, but the alliance was not broken by this. Fall 1902. The French perspective. The talks here are actually not as interesting as early on. Most of my coordination is with Germany, who's working with Russia in the north, while also convincing England that their only chance at survival is in Scandinavia. We agree moves, and things seem relatively easy. My conversations with Austria are the real key here. I start really going in with the FGA idea and try and get them on board. They seem hesitant to jump in, but they do reveal some good information. There's a locked-in AIR that will either collapse on him or go west as a triple next year. They say they are reliant on Italy in the east to finish off Turkey, but they are paranoid about IR making a move because of the press I, and apparently Turkey, are sending. 1902 builds. The Italian perspective. So at this point, Austria and I were discussing the idea that he might start a war with Russia soon, while I would move west and tackle France. I said I was okay with it as long as we made progress against Turkey first. 1902 builds. The French perspective. The only thing to mention about the winter builds is that I was able to convince Germany to only build armies so that I didn't have to deal with 3 German fleets later on, and for their armies to go east. Spring 1903, the Italian perspective. This season, I was increasingly nervous about the power of the Franco-German alliance. I pushed Austria to stay in the Austrian-Italian-Russian coalition until they were substantially weakened, because I felt it was unlikely that I could beat France as things were, and if Austria and Russia fought, my chances would be even less. Spring 1903. The French perspective. My press with Italy and Russia were kind of low this turn, which may have been as a result of my fear of letting these strong players know that I knew about the AIR. Almost all of my coordination with the East was with Austria. We formed the FGA group chat and discussed how if they made a big move, they would have a strong position in the East, and I would have the opportunity to make a move against Germany after England is gone. They say they want to play it a little slower, but arrange a bounce in Bohemia to disguise their allegiance to us. I don't like it, but I have to accept it. Fall 1903. The Italian perspective. This season, Austria and I shared a strong consensus that the Austrian-Italian-Russian alliance needed to continue until we could get some breathing room against the French and Germans. I did tell Austria that if Germany and France actually turned on each other, and we confirmed it by seeing actual centers change hands, at that point we could go after Russia. I sensed he might be getting a bit restless, in part because Austria mentioned that Turkey was trying to convince them they needed to stab Russia, but that they totally weren't buying it. It just seems like an unnecessary point to bring up, unless you're actually wavering about whether to stab the mutual ally or not. In any case, I agreed with his stated position that it would be very unwise to stab right now, and I made sure to say so emphatically. Fall 1903. The French perspective. Once the spring orders go through, I think of only two things. Russia just made a huge tactical blunder in not taking St. Pete with an army and using the fleet in Norway as a raider, and that Italy's move from Trieste to Tyrolia confirms everything Austria has been saying about the AIR. I once again make the pitch to Austria that now is their best opportunity to strike. They can take Trieste and Romania and establish themselves as the power in the east. Germany is moving hard against Russia, and I'm about to move against Italy. Austria doesn't like that idea, but does reveal the AIR moves to myself and Germany, so Germany can successfully bounce Bohemia once again while they slip into Galicia. I'm assuming that's by agreement, though. This also allows me to know Italy is moving my way, so it's time to move. I knew I was getting a few builds from England, so the best path was to make sure I left Marseille so it was open for a fleet build while moving into West Med. For fun, I asked Italy if our DMZ was in place. They said yes, and I giggled to myself because I knew this was an attempt at deception. In the West, I assumed I'd just take 2 English dots, but Germany came to me and told me that they had convinced England to convoy them over to Edinburgh with support, so that they could have the units to attack me or something. I don't know the exact pitch, but essentially Germany is giving me an opportunity to completely take England out of the game and go +3. I take that opportunity with the promise of waiving Paris in the winter while building 2 fleets. This all worked out perfectly, and in the winter I stuck to the deal I made with Germany. At this stage we were discussing how to both get a good enough score to both make the finals. I could have lied and said I wasn't doing great, but that wasn't the case. My other game was going very well too. Unlike Germany, so we discussed him finishing ahead of me in an agreed draw, while I would get a very solid second place at this stage. I am normally a bit more ruthless, but a player I look up to and respect a lot once told me that a tournament is a marathon and not a sprint, and I don't have to push for an unnecessary solo when I can make a good deal that likely gets me into that top 7 for the final. Spring 1904, the Italian perspective. This season, the plan was for the Austrian, Italian, and Russian units to begin flooding to the stalemate line with Germany while trying to slow down the inevitable western conquest of St. Petersburg. There was also a supported Austrian move into Constantinople as the three of us continued balancing our war in the west with finishing Turkey off. When orders processed, though, I saw a supported Austrian move into Romania. That seemed unlikely to be good for the Austrian-Italian-Russian coalition. Spring 1904, the French perspective. Writing this after the game, I honestly don't remember my exact strategic reasoning for the moves in the Mediterranean. I do remember being surprised I got into Tyrrhenian Sea, as I expected that to bounce with unit in Rome, but I can't complain about the good position. My moves with Germany were all coordinated once again, moving into Norwegian to help them into Barents in the fall. Austria leaked what orders they knew, and let us know that they were making a move on Russia while picking up Caen. I was a bit frustrated at this stage that their stab didn't include a hit on Trieste also, but I was just happy they were finally doing something. I personally believe they waited too long, and was really put off by the fact that they were trying to do the FGA while keeping the AI intact, as all that does was slow me down. But I didn't mention my displeasure at this stage. Fall 1904, the Italian perspective. After the fallout from spring moves, I was feeling pretty hopeless and desperate. The strength of an alliance is usually in the shared sense of self-interest between the allied powers. You have to all believe you share the same needs, in a sense. You're either all attacking together, or you're all defending together. If one person believes they need to do the other thing, it tends to break the whole alliance apart. Austria's way of justifying what he did was to say, "So I had to make a move, just felt the window closing. I'd like to support you into Ankara so you can get a build if you're up for that." It was hard for me, in communicating with Austria, to tone down how dumb I thought this decision was. But since Austria was offering me a possible build, I made the effort. I said, "I'd like a build, but I think we're pretty well finished after this decision on your part. How can we hold out against FG if you're stabbing Russia in the back? Did France convince you that they'll turn on Germany if you stab Russia? Because that's not happening unless France thinks the solo is in reach." Reading over this message, I think there must have been a part of me that thought I could still get them to make up somehow, unrealistic though that sounds. I was also aware that the French player seemed very savvy at this point. Anyway, Austria said that it was actually a discussion between him and Germany, and honestly, I almost screamed reading that. Getting Germany to turn on France was always going to be a much more difficult and unrealistic endgame strategy than getting France to turn on Germany for board position reasons, and it suggested to me that the Austrian player didn't really think this through before stabbing. I explained to him that Germany had been trying to talk Russia into making the same bad decision. Russia had discussed it with me, and I had talked him off the ledge. So the odds that Germany would live up to his word here were not good, to say the least. Fall 1904, the French perspective. This was the move that decided the game. Russia was angry at Austria for the stab, and came to me in Germany with the offer of being a janissary. I also went to Austria and asked them their thoughts on the game. They said we should make a play for Warsaw, while he finished off Turkey by supporting Italy into Ankara. Any allegiance to Austria died the moment he told me this. He's actively helping the person I'm fighting for no reason other than to slow me down? So I went to Russia and told them to hold Ankara so that I didn't have to deal with an Italian build, which they accepted. Italy did nothing wrong with Russia, but at this point I think he was just happy to let FG roll, because he was angry with Austria, and we played into that. With Germany, we just discussed tactics. They didn't want to risk Munich, so instead of doing the guaranteed convoy to Piedmont, I switched it to a convoy to Tuscany. I moved to Barents to force disband the fleet in St. Pete, while advising Germany to side with Russia, support them into Galicia, and push them forward, and for them to not backfill Warsaw. Their alliance to us was more important than the extra build, for now. In the south, I decided to go for Tunisia. I spent hours looking at a 50-50 between Ionian and Naples, and funnily enough I had a convoy from Spain to Naples in for a long time, as I thought it would be really cool to pull off against such a strong player. But eventually I realized that if Italy saw this as a 50-50 like I did, there was a way to cover it. And the counter to that defense was by walking into Tunisia, so I did that and it worked. So I like to think I made a huge soul read with that play. I somehow got into Tuscany also, did not expect that either, and this practically just ended what could have been a really drawn-out war in one turn. Italy goes down 1 because Russia did what I asked, and the FGA is over because it's just FG rolling the board now. Spring 1905, the Italian perspective. At this point, I was just urging Austria not to go after me the way he went after Russia. I don't know that there's all that much he could do to me from this position, and maybe he had learned his lesson without needing to be asked, but it's usually better to work the persuasion on people than not, considering that I'm under a pretty deadly-looking attack by France here. Any single center could be the difference between making it out alive in this game or suffering an ignominious death at this point. And Austria assured me that he was going to do everything he could to push Russia back rather than wasting time on me. Spring and fall 1905, the French perspective. There's one goal for myself in Germany this year, and that's to keep pushing forward while trying to keep everyone alive. I only take one Italian dot while trading Belgium to set up for an arranged end state that both me and Germany are happy with for the tournament purposes, and we march forward. The press really slowed down for me, and I was a lot more focused on other games I was playing at this point, but in general, I wanted to set up a position where Germany could have a lead on me in the agreed draw state without any risk of a solo. Fall 1905, the Italian perspective. This is a very tactical season, in that there wasn't much I could do diplomatically anymore, so I just tried to hold on to what I could with very limited success. Despite all that Austria had said about still wanting to be on good terms with me, I lost Trieste to him, as he further pulled back from the front with Germany, and by extension the front with Russia, hastening all of our shared downfall. 1905 builds, the Italian perspective. At this point, I destroyed one of my fleets on the Italian peninsula, because I wanted to focus mainly on fighting Austria, and use my only remaining unit in Italy to slow down France a little, without focusing overmuch on an already lost battle. Spring 1906, the Italian perspective. Not that much for me to say here. I countered the Austrian move to put another unit next to Greece and take it from me, while I inevitably lost ground in my homeland to France, and Austria lost ground to the Germans and Russians. 1906, the French perspective. Germany and I agreed orders with the hope to draw in winter 1906. The position was for him to have the top on 15, while I got a strong score on 12, and I also would have the potential to stab him if a draw didn't go through. Meaning that yes, if I wanted to make a move in the following year, I could have soloed, but that wasn't necessary for me in the tournament, so I didn't take the shot. Ultimately, the game didn't go through. This would have been a problem for me, but I somehow can fall 1906, the Italian perspective. At this point, the writing was on the wall for how this game would end. Austria, Russia, and I would probably not be in the winner's circle. However, it was a definite fact that Germany was showing some favoritism toward Russia and trying to keep him at least alive for now, while France understandably felt no similar commitment to me. Given that, I decided to curry some favor with Russia myself to hopefully live a little longer. I also somewhat preferred him over Austria, given how Austria had destroyed our defensive line for a short-sighted stab in the unlikely hope that it would inspire the Germans to stab the French, which looked like a bad idea to me at the time, and had now been confirmed as such. Russia and I reassured each other of our eternal friendship, though I must acknowledge how little that reassurance mattered at this point. 1906 builds, the Italian perspective. I destroyed my last army because I just wanted to hold on to that one unit to keep Greece and take advantage of any opportunities that a war between France and everyone else might create in the event that he went for the solo. A fleet seemed the best for this. I convinced Germany to only build Army Berlin, so that if the draw didn't go through, I knew it wasn't him going for a solo. Spring 1907, the Italian perspective. As the game circled the drain for me, I hoped to eliminate the only real threat to my survival besides the French ability to snuff me out instantly at any moment with little notice. Those Austrian units in Serbia and Bulgaria. I wouldn't be surprised if Austria wanted some revenge here, so I was happy to help Russia into Bulgaria, effectively preventing anyone but France from finishing me off, since France seemed willing to at least consider leaving me alive, and was for some reason apparently not going to try for the potential solo he could achieve here. 1907. The French perspective. If this was a regular or standard game, I would go for the solo right now, but instead I have two ideas. Either the game draws this year, or I switch the agreement to a 17-15 end state, with Italy and Turkey surviving in Greece and Smyrna. So I still have to convince Germany to agree to my spring moves. He accepts it as a prevention method to a potential German solo, and in the fall, I would have taken Belgium, Holland, and Norway. But the draw vote finally went through. A fun game for sure, but I think I was a bit lucky to find an ally so loyal to me, while most of the other strong players were too busy to put the same amount of effort into the game. But it ends exactly how I dreamed up, and now to see if that's enough for a place in the final. Fall 1907, the Italian perspective. The game ended in a draw at this point, so there's not too much to say. I survived, but it hardly seems worth celebrating, ending on one center. The Turks did better despite coming under a combined attack early on, at least finishing with their home centers. The game really speaks a lot to the importance of the quality of the alliances you build. If you work with short-sighted people, it won't work out for either of you. You need to share the vision you have in a compelling way that wins your ally over, and anticipate the sticking points that may prevent them from buying in completely so that you can address those too, even if they do not bring them up openly. I hope you guys enjoyed this diplomacy commentary, and I look forward to your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll show it with a like and by joining the roughly half of my viewers who are subscribed. And I also support putting your hands together for the thoughtful and generous people whose names now appear on screen, our wonderful patrons and translators. You too can join the Alligator Army by clicking the link to join my Patreon in the video description to get access to a world of exclusive Diplomacy Podcast episodes and occasional videos accessible only through my Patreon, as well as early access to all YouTube content. I'd buy that for $1. Till next time, Florida Man, out.